I believe that the conservative movement, the anti-abortion movement, absolutely despises the fact that she is educating so many people that this is even an option, that this is even a thing. And in fact, a thing that in a functioning democracy might actually be supported, in addition to things like paid parental leave and, baby support and like access to food and all those other things that would, you would think in a pro-family environment already, you'd think we'd already have those.
Hey there, fellow nerds. Welcome back to another episode of The Present Illness, the podcast where two physicians try to make sense of a world that's a little febrile and underdiagnosed. I'm Arghavan, Salles, a surgeon scientist, and your friendly neighborhood doom scroller in residence.
And I'm Alyssa, Burgart, an anesthesiologist and bioethicist who tracks news and health law like their EKGs full of spikes and surprises. The Present Illness is where we dig into public health, politics, culture, and ethics with a scalpel in one hand and a meme in the other. As a note to our listeners, we often talk about tough topics that can be intense, activating, and so if you need to take a break, we totally get it.
Indeed. We want to give a big thank you to everyone who's listening and some extra special love to our subscribers on whichever platform you've subscribed or followed us. And a warm welcome to anyone who just stumbled in from mourning the loss of one of the greatest people to ever have lived, Dolly Parton.
National treasure. I was actually in the OR on Tuesday when a friend of mine another physician who I bonded with over music, texted me that she had passed, and just, it's a real bummer. I would like to have had many, many more years of Dolly Parton in this world.
Well, people online have a lot of feelings about her, and one of the things that I've seen a few times is that, like, idea that the Grim Reaper, like, really messed up here. Like, was the address not clear? Was the name not clear? I've seen people suggesting that the Grim Reaper needs to be on a performance improvement plan for the bad choices being made. As we've lost, Catherine O'Hara this year, Hayden Panettiere very recently.
Oh, so sad.
I mean, obviously so many wonderful people. And anyway, so I don't know what's going on with the Grim Reaper, but I don't approve of the current performance. Okay. Dolly Parton, of course, was a musical powerhouse, is not even a strong enough word. I think it was a few years back, forget in what interview, that it like kind of came to light that she had written Jolene and I Will Always Love You on the same day. Like, most people can't write either of those songs or that caliber of song, like, ever. I mean, I certainly can't ever in my life. And she had those two just incredible hits on the same day. And she is one of the people who has used her wealth for so much good. She has the Imagination Library where they send books out to children. I believe it's one book a month. They've shipped out over 330 million books for some children. Those are the only books they'll ever own, are the books that they got from the Imagination Library. She had an eagle. It wasn't a preserve, but like, she had eagles at Dollywood, and they had released like 180 of them into the Smoky Mountains.
Wow.
Which is amazing. She has given money to so many causes where our government has fallen short. People affected by fires in Tennessee, people affected by Hurricane Helene in Tennessee. I mean, millions of dollars. She gave $1 million to the efforts to create a vaccine for COVID in the early part of the pandemic.
There's also a common trend amongst people who like high schoolers who perform in bands, where she has bought the band uniforms are very expensive, and so she has bought those for just hundreds and hundreds of high schoolers who wouldn't otherwise have been able to afford band uniforms.
And I believe she did that in particular for schools that had a lot of Black students in them, based on like what's been reported. She had, a lot of revenue that came in from Whitney Houston singing I Will Always Love You, and she invested that back into Black communities. She was a staunch advocate for the entire LGBTQ plus community. She once entered a Dolly Parton lookalike contest and lost to a drag queen. And there's
She's also
great...
like super funny.
Yeah, very.
I love watching her interviews because she's so disarming. And I love the way, she talks about how one of her origin stories that she'll tell is about, or that she did tell, was about how, they saw a woman in town who was, very made up, wearing sort of sparkles and big lipstick and all that. And how her mom said, oh, well, that woman's just trash. And she was like, I want to be trash, mama.
Yeah,
and
exactly. Yeah, she talks about how she thought that woman was beautiful, like whatever her story was, that she thought she looked beautiful. And so she wanted to look like that. And she obviously started numerous films. 9 to 5 is one that probably a lot of people remember. It was all about working women and the way women are treated in the workplace and their fight for equality. Pretty great that she did that. Anyway, I mean, she's like an absolute icon. We cannot summarize all of her incredible accomplishments here. She was Miley Cyrus's godmother. I hope that Miley has good support around her because I know they were very close.
Yeah. 55 Grammy nominations and 10 wins.
I mean,
third most nominated woman actually in Grammy history, second only to Beyonce and Taylor Swift.
Wow.
Talk about a legend.
Absolutely. Somebody had posted, that because she had a recent performance, I don't remember exactly when, with Miley, where she's, super dressed up, heels, everything. They were like, I want people to remember that she didn't die a frail woman. She died a rock star in leather and heels. And I mean, she was performing right to, almost to the end. She loved music. She loved people.
And I think she loved working. I think she loved like building her business and like being the best at things, and really incredible to see all the things she accomplished in just 80 years.
I know. Somebody had said like 80 years old, she was just a kid. And I know they were, kind of joking, but like she had so much left to do, and even in her own words, she said that. And I mean, she really did so much for education, like probably more than any other private individual who's not directly involved in teaching.
Yeah.
She also had like the employees at Dolly would all get free tuition, books, supplies, everything to further educate themselves.
A story I had heard about when she had started the book, like making sure that kids had access to books, was about how her father was illiterate. And, she had actually hoped that maybe he would want to learn to read. And he was like, nope, just happy to see you doing what you're doing. And,
but he said he was very proud of her for that program.
Yeah. For really investing in the future of so many kids, and especially starting off in Tennessee with so many children in Tennessee who had truly nothing. Similar, she grew up in deep, deep poverty. And you talk about a rags to riches story on blood, sweat, and tears. I mean, what a wild, wild ride.
And so much talent, like she had talent, but then also such a strong work ethic. It's like you have to have all the things. And she's such a great demonstration of, if you like, what it takes, right, to have that level of success, and then what it means to give back. Because she also had, I mean, again, we could go on all day and I don't want us to, but like, I do want to just add one more program, which is that she had, I believe it was in the county that she grew up, that the graduation rates for high school were only, I believe, like 65% or so. And so she started this program where people would get paired with a buddy. And if they both graduated, they each got $500 from her.
Wow.
And the dropout rate dropped significantly, down to somewhere like 5 to 10%.
I mean, can you imagine having like Dolly Parton personally rooting for you?
Yeah, I know. I mean, she's just incredible. Anyway.
Well, for anybody who is, I mean, whether you love Dolly or whether you're Dolly curious, Jad Abumrad's from NPR had a wonderful multi-part series about her called Dolly Parton's America. Jad Abumrad's dad is actually a physician and took care of Dolly. And so that's how he ended up meeting her and being able to to put together this entire series really about like her life and her career. And I think it's a lovely, I'm going to re-listen to it. It's been a number of years and it's fabulous.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. And I would just challenge anyone listening to maybe read a book in honor of Dolly, because as we've discussed before, like we have a real literacy crisis, and probably not mostly with our listeners, but even to be a model for other people. Maybe if we haven't been doing any reading, we should pick something up now.
Oh, well, I'm a big reader. I actually, and I'm attached obviously with all these like accoutrements for the podcast, but I have Dolly Parton's Songteller book, which is also lovely. So if you're looking to check it out from your library, I'm be honest with you, there might be a wait at your local library. Worth it. And yeah, I love that recommendation. Read a book. Love books.
Yes. It's one of the best ways that we can support her. Also, her family did put out, I believe, a request to, if people want to give in a financial way, to support the Imagination Library.
Which I think is in all 50 states now.
Well, I have not fact checked this, but somebody told me they have actually shipped books all over the world.
Oh, wow.
I thought it was in the U.S. So again, I haven't fact checked that one, but that's what somebody just said on one of my posts.
I'm going to look it up right now.
Okay.
31 years of Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. And it says that they are now located in besides the United States, Australia, Canada, the Republic of Ireland, and the United Kingdom.
It's pretty fantastic. And they do, I believe, a book a month until age 5. Somebody had posted their kid's like graduation letter from the Imagination Library.
Well, so I have a bunch of friends that live in Tennessee, and I was in a band with a bunch of people from Tennessee, and I remember them saying like, "Oh, well, Dolly Parton sends our kids a book every day," and I said, "What are you guys talking about?" Or not every day, sorry, like every month. And I had never heard of it because we didn't have it in California until fairly recently. But yeah, my friends who have kids in Tennessee like taught me about this many years ago, and it's been so fabulous to like watch it grow.
Yeah, and I believe they're like age appropriate, so they have like a specific progression for the books as the kid ages, and so it is kind of like graduating. Like you made it through our program. Anyway, it's very sweet. Read a book. Listen to that podcast. We'll put a link. Check out a book. Buy a book. Whatever.
I love it.
In honor of the great, the wonderful, unique, incomparable Dolly Parton.
Incomparable Dolly Parton. Gone too soon.
Absolutely.
Let me also, that's a downer. I did not want to have to talk about that today, but she's absolutely worth it.
Yeah.
Well, should we talk about egg freezing? Should we talk about?
Should we talk about perfect segue?
AOC.
Yeah.
Should we talk about how like everybody needs to know about reproductive stuff?
Yes, I think we absolutely should talk about that. So we mentioned this, I think, 2 episodes ago, that AOC was kind of blogging her experience with egg freezing, and this had a certain parts of the population very upset. Because how dare she? She's 36. How dare she do this? She should just have a kid. Why didn't she have a kid already? / why is she telling
Why don't you mind your own business?
Yeah, because we have to police what women do, and what women don't do. We just have to police women. That's like the function of society. Anyway, so she had this, multi-part series where she every day talked about what was happening in her egg freezing process. She talked about why she was doing it, the egg freezing, and also why she was blogging it, which has a lot to do with wanting to raise awareness of the procedure itself, and in terms of her blogging it, and bringing attention to the lack of accessibility. So she had to save up. I think we talked about this when we brought it up before. She had to save up to be able to do this. And, a lot of insurance doesn't cover egg freezing or IVF or any of that. And so she wanted to, she clearly is interested in trying to put forward some legislation that may make it more affordable to people, because right now it really is like for people who have a decent amount of disposable income, which is just not that much of the country. And so, so she basically every day gave updates and kind of had like certain teaching points that she was trying to get across about the specific injections, what the hormones are, what the hormones do to the follicles. For folks who aren't familiar, the basic idea is that you take medications to encourage more follicles to develop so that, and to develop kind of together as a cohort so that by the time you get to a retrieval, you have multiple, ideally, follicles that hopefully have mature eggs in them. And then you're able to retrieve those eggs and then freeze them for future use. Now, you could also go straight from the retrieval to IVF, meaning that you combine those eggs with sperm and create embryos if you know what sperm you want to be using to create those embryos. And AOC, folks may not have realized, had been engaged and then is no longer and has not been for some time. So she was not freezing embryos, she was freezing eggs, which is actually the most common reason that in this country women will proceed with egg freezing is because they don't have a partner. Other cases include like if you know you're going to have your ovaries removed because of cancer, for example, or cancer risk related to a genetic condition, then this can be a way to preserve fertility before you lose your ovaries. But the majority of people who seek egg freezing, this is according to the data, is because they don't have a partner yet or they're not sure about the partner they're with. And so they want to kind of reserve the right, kind of. Some people talk about it as an insurance policy, which I don't think is accurate, and we can talk about why. But it's kind of like gives you a sense that you can freeze time in a way. And that's, I think, what's attractive about it for a lot of people. So anyway, so she went through what are the hormones. She's gone through the costs, that these medications are very costly. And also the costs vary depending on how long it takes for you as an individual, for your follicles to develop to the point that they are appropriate to proceed with a retrieval. And that makes it hard to plan. So she's also talked about the unpredictability of it all. Starting at a certain point in time, you will have ultrasound and lab every other day or so until they say, okay, we're ready. And then your retrieval maybe the next day or 2 days later. And the day of your retrieval, you can't work at all. You're under anesthesia. So it's a very difficult schedule for most people who work. Because what kind of job can you just be like, okay, I'm off tomorrow or I'm off 2 days from now, no notice whatsoever, right? As a physician, like we don't really have that flexibility.
Yeah, and like not get fired.
Yeah. So that's another part of what's challenging about this process that she talked about. And I think, from my perspective, as someone who has tried to freeze eggs, I tried 3 cycles, and this was years ago when I was 38 and 39, and I didn't get any eggs. I've written about this before, but from my perspective, I think what's really great about, I think there's lots of things that are really great about her doing this. One is, to your point about like people should know more about our reproductive health and how these things work, what options exist. So I think she's really raised awareness for a lot of people. She's normalized that sometimes we don't have everything in place to have kids when we want to. And so then we start thinking about what are our options? How do we keep that hope alive? That's kind of what I think these procedures offer, some hope. And as a prominent politician, someone whose name is being thrown out there as potentially running for president in 2028, I think it's extraordinarily powerful for her to be taking people along with this very personal journey. So I think, like, no matter what amount of education we as physicians want to do, we would never have the reach that she has. Even the reproductive endocrinologists who, write books about this, like, I don't see any of us having anywhere near the reach that AOC has had. So it's a huge public service that she's done.
Well, and I think there's just one of the things I'll just also say is this is when you have the ability to look online and see someone who has gone through a procedure that you're considering going through or something that you know that you're going to need to go through, this process of having digital witnesses available is really, really helpful. And what's nice in terms of the fact that she's been documenting her experience is that she is providing that digital witnessing for a wide variety of people who otherwise may have a hard time even understanding that, like, certainly there are other people on the internet who are also documenting this process and sharing it, but you're not going to find them necessarily the way that you're going to find AOC when, like, every newspaper in America is, talking about whether or not they think that she should share it or not.
Yeah, that's right. And it has really put a lot of conservatives into like a frenzy.
Tizzy. Ooh, a tizzy. There's been a tizzy. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Why didn't she have kids already?
You should plan for the future? What?
No, because she should never, according to them, right? She should never have had this career, because if she didn't have this career, she would have already been able to have kids and she wouldn't need to do this. Which of course may or may not be true, right? Like, not having a career like as in politics does not guarantee that you can find a partner.
We know some of the most incredible women on earth, including yourself, right? Who are like figuring out how to have a family, what kind of a life do you want to have? And when there is not some partner available who's like a good fit for your life, a good investment, if you will.
So that brings up another interesting point. So I think there's a lot that people don't understand about egg freezing, and I'm not a reproductive endocrinologist. I'm just someone who's dealt with infertility for like 8 years. So I have a patient perspective, but also have read some of the research, on the medical side. I think one of the things that people don't understand, or maybe don't realize exactly, is that it doesn't really give you control. Like, AOC, when she set out to do this, said she was doing this to take control of her life. And I had, I think we talked before about this piece that I had published in Time, where my tweet about it was like, can women really take control of our fertility? Because I also had that same thinking about it. Like, if I do this, it'll give me control, and then I'll have these eggs. And then if I find a partner later, then I can use these eggs. And so I think that's a very honestly, I'm not saying everybody thinks that way, but I think a lot of women approach it thinking that way. Like, this is going to, again, be an insurance policy for me, so that even if it takes a while to find someone, when I do find someone, I'll have these eggs sitting there. And I think what it really offers us, egg freezing, what it really offers us is a little bit of hope that something might be possible later. Because it's far from a guarantee for many reasons. One is that you don't know, no matter how many eggs you froze, you don't really know their quality. So one of the things about freezing eggs that, in terms of like what information you get is what you don't get feedback on the quality of those eggs. So even if you're able to freeze like a huge number of eggs, you don't know how many of them will successfully be fertilized.
Oh.
And
they can't like look at them and be like, these ones are awesome.
I believe, okay, again, this is not my medical specialty, but I believe what they do is they look at the maturity. They have to be what's called M2. So if they're not at that maturity, they won't get frozen at all. But beyond that, they can't predict, as of now, which eggs would get fertilized. And in fact, when you go to thaw the eggs, which is what you have to do before you later combine them with sperm, you lose some number of eggs every time. There's attrition kind of at every stage. So let's say you freeze like 30 eggs, some number of those eggs will not survive the thaw. And then you'll go to try to fertilize the remaining. And then maybe you get, it's hard. Again, people cannot predict 6 embryos, 8 embryos, 10 embryos. I don't know. You get some number of embryos. Of those embryos, the question will be how many of them are euploid? Or at least for a lot of people, that would be a question, is like, how many of them are chromosomally normal? And the older the eggs are, the older the person is when the person freezes their eggs, right? The fewer of those embryos will have a normal number of chromosomes. And so you may end up with, even starting with 30 eggs, like 1, 2, or 0 healthy embryos. There was a segment on 60 Minutes a few years back where they were talking about egg freezing, and they had interviewed a woman who had frozen 30 eggs, I believe in her early 30s. I wrote about this in my Substack. I can put a link. But she had 30 eggs, and then later on met a partner, and they went to thaw those eggs and make embryos, and they ended up with 1 embryo that was unhealthy. And by then it's like kind of late is the problem, right? Because if you think about egg freezing as like, it's going to give me a chance later, the challenge is you don't know how many embryos you'll get. And often, not always, but often it may be that you're trying to use those eggs so far down the line that you may no longer have the ability to freeze more eggs yourself or retrieve more eggs yourself to be able to do further rounds of IVF. Or if you do that, you're older, the quality of them is less, et cetera. It gets harder and harder. And so I think that part, a lot of people maybe don't fully appreciate. And for lots of reasons, you can imagine like if you're younger, when you freeze your eggs, right, you have more likely to get more eggs on a given cycle, which is good. And they're more likely to be healthy eggs, which is also good. And the more likely you are to actually meet someone and maybe not need to use those eggs. Right?
Which is ideal.
Right. But then you will have like gone through this whole process and spent all this money and then be paying all these storage fees, right? And then not ended up using them. I mean, the data in a systematic review that came out, I think 2 years ago, showed that only about 11% of people who freeze eggs end up going back to use them. Now, they didn't ask people why not, right? The ones who didn't come back. So is it because they met someone and they had kids otherwise, or is it because they never met anyone and so they never wanted to make embryos? Or, we don't really know what happened. Of the 11% who came back, only about 29% of those 11% were successful at having a single live birth. So a single child. Now, of course, again, there's likely variability, like based on how old you were when you froze those eggs, how likely you were to be able to have a live birth. And they didn't break it down that way in the paper. But these are some of the things that I think not everyone is aware of, and also not every fertility specialist tells you about when you're having a consultation for egg freezing. And also, to be fair to those doctors, there's a lot that you get told during those first couple of visits. So maybe even they do tell you, but it gets lost in the shuffle. But I just know that for me personally, I do not recall. Again, they may have said it. I don't know. But I do not recall being told that, for example, I might not get any eggs. I didn't know that was a potential outcome. Or that, I mean, you might say that's naive and that's fair. But that's just the truth of my experience. And I didn't know that, I could go through a cycle and take all these medications and get 15 days, 16 days, 18 days in, which is long. Usually they don't go that long. But just keep going, spend all this money only to then cancel the cycle and never even go to a retrieval. That's not a thing that I knew was a possibility. So imagine how stunned I was, right, to have taken that time off work and spent all that money and like the roller coaster ride of the hormones, all the labs and the ultrasounds, and then be like, so actually we're not going to do anything this time and we're just going to start all over. I mean, that was really brutal for me.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's obviously one extreme of outcomes. And for most people, it's not that. But, if you're like in your mid to late 30s and you get like 6 eggs, 8 eggs, that's not a great likelihood of success. There's not a great likelihood of success that you will end up with a live birth from just that, unless you do multiple cycles. There's a paper that came out 10 years ago, so it's a little bit older, looking at like how many, based on your age group, how many and how many eggs you have, what your likelihood of having one live birth would be. So as you can imagine, the older you get, the more eggs you need, but also the harder it is to get those eggs when you're older. So anyway, these are just some things that I think are useful for people to know as they're thinking about maybe doing this and freezing the eggs and having to pay those storage fees. Like, and to be clear, I'm a proponent of this. I have talked for a long time and written multiple research articles about how, as a physician, I feel that medical schools should be covering this, residency programs should be covering this. Like, we should have the options to do whatever we think is right. And I just think that it's appropriate for us to be given the right expectations, like the accurate expectations of what we can get, because it's not an insurance policy. It's not a guarantee, but it's a possibility that something in the future might work out if you even come back to try to use them.
That is a lot. And I remember there was a point I can't remember when this was, where like a bunch of the big tech companies started paying for egg freezing. And it was, I mean, these are the same companies that like give people 3 meals a day because they expect you to be there all the time. And had a lot of not great press around the way they treat women. And so I remember there being a point at which suddenly they were like, we're a great company. We're offering egg freezing. And I was like, huh. I mean, great benefit. Also, interesting move.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the challenge of it. Like, I definitely want it to be available and all these procedures, because there's lots of other reasons, right? That people, another reason, for example, that people will use IVF is if they have a genetic abnormality and their partner has a known genetic abnormality, and together they could, yield harmful combinations, then some people will end up doing IVF for that reason, because then they can test the embryos and then make sure that they are transferring a healthy embryo. So it's not these procedures are not necessarily just for fertility, like infertility, lack of a partner kind of situations. Also, obviously, if you're single, like I am, a single person, you're going to need to have some version of these procedures to have a baby with your own genetics, if that's what is of interest to you. Or same-sex partners, right, will end up needing often something, although, you could do IUI, potentially intrauterine insemination, which means not having to do egg retrievals and all that. Just depends on lots of factors. But anyway, point is that there are many different instances where people may use some version of reproductive endocrinology technology, and in a lot of cases it's not covered. So I absolutely think it should all be covered for whoever needs it whenever they need it. And I think for, the conservatives who are like, this is ridiculous, women just need to prioritize family, have kids earlier, you shouldn't need any of this stuff. They refuse, it seems to me, that they refuse to see why people aren't having as many children and why they're not having them at as young an age. And a big part of it is the economics, right? That we're not making money, most of us. We have a really terrible problem of wealth inequality in this country. Then we have like no social services, basically, right? Like you can't count on healthcare for you or the baby. You cannot count on low cost or free childcare for that child once you have it. You can't even count on paid parental leave, because we don't have federal paid parental leave in this country. So even just those 3 things, like already you're working hard, you're working multiple jobs, like how are you supposed to make that happen? And so our government, instead of making policies that would help people who do want to have kids to be able to do it, instead takes this like judgmental stance of like, well, how come you didn't do it already?
Yes. And so, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because like we have this super pro-natalist conservative agenda right now. And so you would think like, oh, why would they be unhappy that people are having babies? But obviously there's all this misogyny involved. But the other aspect of it is a fetal personhood movement, which is, so the anti-abortion movement is incredibly opposed to IVF and to pretty much anti-fertility and anti-infertility measures for lots of reasons. And like, as far as the Catholic Church and a bunch of, more conservative Christian sects, like, they see all of this as being just supporting abortion. That, I remember there's been, many movements over the years about protecting embryos, and that each of those embryos needs to be adopted out to like some person who's obligated to turn it into a fetus. I mean, it's really deep seated in that I think a lot of this opposition to also watching a powerful woman go through this process. I believe that the conservative movement, the anti-abortion movement, absolutely despises the fact that she is educating so many people that this is even an option, that this is even a thing. And in fact, a thing that in a functioning democracy might actually be supported, in addition to things like paid parental leave and, baby support and like access to food and all those other things that would, you would think in a pro-family environment already, you'd think we'd already have those. But
I mean, just to be clear, like some European countries, people have a year or 18 months of paid
and how I
parental leave.
dreamed of that. Oh, when I had my babies and I was in residency, how I dreamed of going back to, my Swedish roots, going to Sweden, having a baby in Sweden. I think I would have been really happy.
It sounds pretty great. But we are making different choices here. And then we're saying, but then why aren't you having babies? I mean, the other thing we didn't talk about is accommodations for pregnancy, in particular in more physical professions like in medicine, right? We have, part of the reason, like let me just say, even if I had a partner when I was a resident, I personally would not have wanted to, and I know lots of people have made different choices and every choice is valid. I personally would not have wanted to have a baby during residency because I didn't want to be taking call while I was pregnant. I didn't want to expose a fetus to that erratic schedule. More importantly, though, for me, I didn't want to have to come back 4 weeks later or 6 weeks later, which was the most that I could get at that time, which also would have meant not taking a single vacation the rest of that year, and I know women do it.
I did it. Don't recommend.
Yeah.
Don't recommend.
I could not conceive doing that myself.
When I was in when I was the chief resident, my last year of residency is when I got pregnant with my son. And I was making this a different calculus, right? Of like, I did not need IVF. I happened to be married to a lovely person who I wanted to have children with. And in a goal to avoid needing these reproductive technologies, I was like, well, we might as well have a baby and suck it up. And I desperately needed a week of vacation so that I wouldn't, do murder. And so there was only 3 weeks left for me to take off after my son was born. And do not recommend.
Yeah. I mean, that's again, totally valid choice. And that's the impossible position that people are in, specifically in the medical training context, because our training is so very long.
Yeah. Well, and obviously there's lots of people where they have a baby and they have no sick days at all. They don't have any protection at all. And I remember even for myself, if I wanted to take more time off, the option I was given was unpaid time off, including potentially losing access to my health insurance, which I had through work, and therefore having an uninsured baby.
Seems like a great idea.
What? I was like, what are we doing?
No, that's wild. The thing that happened, I remember that was like a big deal when I was a resident, was the American Board of Surgery basically said that if you wanted to take more time off, unpaid, mind you, if you wanted to take more time off, they would let you do an extra year.
Well,
that was the solution. Like if you need to take more than this, 4 to 6 weeks, whatever it was at the time, we will let you, and then you will need to do an extra year.
We called it being punished for having a baby. So like, because I had had a child, I had had a child right before I started my residency. And so I had started residency later. And at the time, there was this long tradition of women just saving up their vacation to basically pay back the time they had taken off. And I had diligently done that. So my intern year, I only took 1 week of vacation because I was trying to buy back that time so that I could graduate on time. Because if you don't graduate on time, you might not be able to get into your fellowship. You might not be able to get the job that you want. There's like all of these things that are built in. But my hospital changed their mind when they went through a merger or something. And like my whole life got up. And anyway, the point is, it's hard enough for all of us to like figure out how to have the families that we want and be able to, have the children or not have the children we want and parent the way we want in a culture writ large that clearly doesn't actually want us to do that. And the other thing I wanted to just say, to come back to the political issues related to this, is that, the conservative movement is really pushing. They're anti-birth control. There's this whole movement going on of all of these social media accounts pushing the exact same like anti-birth control lies, and pushing again this like trad wife lifestyle of like get married as young as possible, don't get an education, and in fact choosing to not get an education and choosing instead to get married exceptionally young and have as many babies as possible, that's actually the best thing. And of course, what does that do? It keeps all of these young, vibrant women who might otherwise want to change the world in some other ways. And you're busy at home raising kids and having and doing that, which, some people genuinely want to spend their time that way. And I applaud them, and you should get to do that. But for a lot of us, my brain would have melted. Like, I love my children, and I never in a million years would have wanted to stay home with them all the time. I was becoming a great doctor, and that was really awesome. And I don't regret making that choice.
Yeah. And I think we just have not, broadly in our society, or certainly not within the profession of medicine, decided that we should be supporting those choices in the way that people really need to be able to have a kid in a humane manner during that critical period of time. I mean, for folks who don't know, for the majority of people, medical training overlaps with our peak years of fertility. And so, for a lot of people who do, end up having a kid during training, that is why, because they're like, either I do it now, and then at least I know my eggs are healthy, or whatever, most likely. Or I wait till later, and then who knows what's going to happen, whether I'll even be able to, get pregnant without reproductive endocrinology, or even with reproductive endocrinology, will it even work for us? That's a trade-off that I don't feel we should have to make. And to your point, though,
and I shouldn't have to fight with the government to get to do it also.
Yes, also true. And for anybody who works in a field where they, are contingent workers or they're hourly workers, they don't even have vacation of any kind, much less parental leave. And because of, again, our economy being what it is, can't even afford time off. And that is also absurd and terrible, and makes it harder for them to have children. So if we think that we want to live in a country where people should have more kids, then we need to make policy decisions that will support people having those kids, or just let people do what they want to do. But what we're doing now, which is yelling at people for not having kids, but then also making sure that all the policies make it as hard as possible to have kids, is the stupidest version or combination of those things that I think we could have.
Have kids, but only this one way. But also, it's clearly there's so much racism.
Only if you're wealthy. Yeah,
well, there's also,
exactly.
This is the thing, right? There's so much classism and racism around this conservative ideology of all the panic around teens not having as many kids is so gross, especially because, by the way, many teens who get pregnant are by adult men.
Yes, because you're talking about these data that have come out showing that for the first time we had more women in their 40s having babies than teenagers, and a segment of our population has really just lost it over that, as if that's hugely problematic because we should have teenagers. I mean, that's that is a huge success for sex education and reproductive autonomy. And
did you see how Trump lost that whole thing on he was trying to completely gut sex education? I think it was earlier this week or late last week. Trump was trying to make all these changes to the teen pregnancy prevention program. And a judge has blocked them. Unfortunately, it's not going to reinstate all the funding that has been held back from them so far. But still, huge win to not allow this ridiculous anti-sex education, anti-support for teens go through. So at least that was good news. We got that.
Always nice to have some good news. That just reminded me, tangential, but Linda McMahon, who is our Secretary of Education, believe it or not, was on some TV show talking about how, kids are going to school and then being transitioned to another gender at school.
Gosh, she's so dumb.
And that we've got to stop this terrible practice. And, one person was like, if you dropped off your kid, if you dropped off your daughter and picked up a son, please go back. You picked up the wrong child. And lots of people commenting on how hard it is to even get a school to give your child Tylenol.
Oh my gosh.
And they think
so
there's
true.
they think there's a secret operating room somewhere there. And then also people like teachers have a really hard time getting supplies, right, for their classrooms, and they have to pay for it out of pocket or fundraiser, use like whatever, Amazon wish lists, etc. So we can't get supplies. What we're supposed to believe is that we can't get supplies for the classrooms, but we can do complicated surgery on kids without anyone knowing. Yeah, it's obviously absurd and part of their whole like culture war thing. Further attacks on trans people for no reason aside from being terrible people who want to distract from everything, all the crime they're actually doing.
Yeah.
They're like, look over here.
From being the worst. Well, there's a number of other stories that we wanted to be able to tell you all a little bit about. And looking at the time, I think it's time for us to do that. There's been this big surrogacy case, which, this is somewhat of an add-on to the fact that we've been talking about infertility care. But there's a couple in California that had hired a Alaska-based nurse to be their surrogate, to basically gestate their baby, their fetus. And unfortunately, that fetus was found to have hypoplastic left heart, and the family had wanted to have an abortion, which was something that this person the surrogate had agreed to in their contract, that this is all something that had been discussed ahead of time. However, that surrogate decided that she did not want to do that and actually absconded to Texas so that she could be in a state where abortion was not available.
Well, importantly, she didn't just hop on a plane. She got a conservative group to fund this whole endeavor for her to move to Texas.
Well, and not to mention all of the publicity around this is obviously completely orchestrated to facilitate this pro-life narrative. Ken Paxton, the governor of Texas, has been involved. And so this baby
Attorney
boy.
General.
Pardon?
He's the Attorney General. Yeah, he's running for office, but I think he's running for Senate. Hopefully he doesn't get that. But anyway, he's the Attorney General. Greg Abbott is the lovely.
Yeah, Greg Abbott. God, they're all so awful. They are
all so awful.
I have a hard time keeping them straight because they're so terrible.
Yes, understandable.
Thank you for the correction. So after the surrogate had been taken to Texas, funded by going to Texas by these anti-abortion groups, the baby was born on August 12th in Dallas, Texas. The baby has this condition called hypoplastic left heart syndrome, which I'll put a link to, kind of an explanation of that because it's sort of a complicated thing. As a pediatric anesthesiologist, it's something we see. But I think for most folks, this is not a common thing for folks to be aware of. The baby has had the first stage of a series of complicated surgeries that are available for babies with hypoplastic left heart syndrome to potentially survive. So the baby has had the first surgery called a Norwood. On August 25th, the parents released a statement saying that their baby is quite critically ill. So it's not clear that things are really going well at this time. So we're going to have to see. There's a lot of really complicated legal issues around this case. And obviously there is a, live born child. There's a lot of fights that are happening around who are the parents of this child, because it should be the parents who started this whole process of hiring the surrogate. But this has become incredibly complicated through this process.
Yeah. And I think that custody battle is kind of the heart of where things are right now and why this conservative group wanted to support this, to be able to say, look at these terrible parents who, wanted to end this pregnancy when in reality, they wanted to minimize the suffering of this fetus that then became this baby who now has an extraordinarily complicated medical situation with unclear, I think, life expectancy from what we're hearing. But that's part of what the so-called pro-life movement does, is they completely ignore quality of life and valuing dignity, and want to frame people who want to preserve that as being murderers.
And one of the things that I think is really hard is the survival for kids who go through all of these procedures, for kids who are born with hypoplastic left heart. These are very intense surgeries. They're major cardiac surgeries. people oftentimes are very worried when an adult has cardiac surgery. You imagine putting a tiny, tiny baby through that. There are other surgeries that happen if they survive. There are other surgeries that happen when they're older. And the majority of these patients, under kind of the best of circumstances, eventually need a heart transplant. And sometimes they need both a heart transplant and a liver transplant, which in my work as a liver transplant anesthesiologist, that's one of the ways that I end up taking care of these kids when they're older, for those that survive. But some of these kids don't survive, even with access to all of these procedures. And so it's not like it's one of the things that's so hard about watching the anti-abortion movement take this out on families who are trying to make informed choices about how to have the babies that they want to have, to raise families in the ways that they want to raise them. This just really flattens all of that. And we should want families to make informed choices. We shouldn't want choices to be shoved down their throats and onto their children.
Yeah. And in the meantime, they have this now medically very complex baby, and the parents are not allowed to take the baby to California. So the procedures for now, until there's a judge making a decision, the procedures are happening in Texas. I mean, it is so obviously stressful to have a sick child and to have to do everything that they're doing while going through a legal battle, while having to take care of that child in a state where they do not live, is a type of cruelty that should not be happening here.
Yeah. We'll keep track of that case. Another nice piece of news, a federal judge blocked Idaho from prosecuting doctors who provide health-protecting abortions. So this is in opposition to Idaho's Defense of Life Act and their Fetal Heartbeat Act. So hopefully this means that maybe a few more physicians will be willing to practice in Idaho, which has been a huge problem.
Yeah. I mean, that's great news. And we've seen a number of obstetric gynecologists leaving the state of Idaho because of the changes that came to the laws there after Roe versus Wade was overturned.
Yeah.
So that's a win. Thank you for sharing that. I had a couple of quick updates. So we talked before about these two former NBA players who had declared themselves for the WNBA draft. And the WNBA has now officially said they are not eligible. Basically, this is a sideshow. We don't want any part in it. One of the men, Enes Kanter Freedom, showed up at a WNBA match earlier this week and got into an altercation, essentially, a fighting match, a yelling match, I should say, with one of the players. So this is, how you prove that you really care about protecting women's sports, is to come and harass the women players in the league.
Literally, you can't make this stuff up.
Well, what is interesting to me is people are going to always do weird things like that, right? That guy clearly has nothing else to do and is looking for 15 minutes of fame. People do weird things. But what I have a harder time understanding is all the people in my comments who are calling him a her, even though he's not actually trans and not making any efforts to transition.
These fucking idiots.
And then yelling at people like me saying, I thought you guys wanted to support trans people. They're making a mockery of trans people. And you're not going to play some word game to get me to be oh yeah, Enes Kanter Freedom belongs in the WNBA, when he's clearly harassing these women who have worked so hard to build this league. And the league is having the best year that they've ever had in terms of engagement. And
it's just so threatening to him, I imagine.
That women have their own league.
I mean, also they're better basketball players than he is, so that's tough.
Yes, that is very hard to accept. Yeah. So anyway, we'll see how that story develops. But that was the update that I want to give. The WNBA has officially said, yeah, we're not playing this game. These people are not eligible. Let's move on.
All right. And you asked me before we started recording if I knew what was going on with the Canada trade war, and I said not really. And so,
so that's the next thing is the trade war we are now in with Canada. Of course, our president had last year threatened all these massive tariffs and levied tariffs on all sorts of countries. And we had been in some sort of negotiation process with Canada, and that just blew up. And Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, was like, we're not doing this. he pulled back. The negotiators said, we're not talking to you anymore. We're done. We're going to levy tariffs back on you all, and we're going to take our toys and leave in the sandbox. And, there's a number of things. So my understanding of the situation is that negotiations had been progressing, but then all of a sudden, kind of at the last minute, the U.S. team, if we can call them that, had a bunch of new demands. And some of them were like, they're different people making demands that were perhaps at odds with each other because, they're not that coordinated. Anyway, so the reaction, that was why. There were all these additional demands that then included things like dictating the terms under which Canada trades with other countries. We have no right
Let
to
me
do
listen. The degree of surprise that I have that this administration has botched that is 0.
Yeah, no, I know. One of the kind of sticking points was around the French language, which is obviously prominent in Quebec and used by people in other parts of Canada as well. And the details of what exactly was being demanded are not totally clear, but something along the lines of the U.S. not wanting to have French language instructions and packaging, but also maybe not wanting Canada to have that.
But I like it because it makes me feel fancy.
To have the French
I want, the products that come from Canada to make me feel a little bit fancy.
Well, they are definitely fancier than us. And so anyway, so Mark Carney, when he made his statement, said, they're attacking the French identity of Canadians, and we're not going to stand for that. So
America.
Yeah. Well, and then Doug Ford. I mean, there's lots of things going on there, but basically, we have further antagonized one of our biggest allies, and it's not going to bode well for anyone who has a business where they are doing trade with Canada. So another win for MAGA, making things so great.
This makes me want to watch Sterling Point even more because it's in Canada.
Yeah, we should actually support more Canadian businesses. We should buy Canadian. I mean, forget it. Anyway, the last little bullet point before we get to Take Two and Call Me in the Morning is the U.S.-Iran war continues. I thought it was a 2-week thing that was supposed to happen. It would be over so soon. Before we knew it, total victory would be ours. Anyway, that continues. The U.S. has now threatened additional sanctions that are kind of more severe than sanctions that they've had in place before. So yeah, it's great. I'm just going to wrap up any day now. We're losing. I saw somebody commented on a post I had about the Canada trade war, and they said, people in Iran are watching going, see what we're dealing with? Anyway, war is not funny. It's terrible. But that's what's happening. So
Take Two and Call Me in the Morning. I need to cleanse the palate. Prescribe me something, Arghavan.
Okay, so what I want to share today is a woman who I found on TikTok. And she does, let me see what she calls it. She says, singing songs from Broadway musicals as Justin Bieber. Okay? So just imagine, I'm going to play you a clip, but it's already kind of a funny premise because I don't really think of Bieber's style as Broadway musical style. But anyway, okay, so here I'm going to play you.
But this is one of my favorite things where you mash up a type of music, or sing like this person, but sing this other song. I think that's so fun.
I agree. So here she is.
I dreamed a dream in time gone by, when hope was high and life was worth the living. I dreamed that love would never die. I dreamed that God would be forgiving. And I was young and unafraid.
Okay, that's enough.
Come on. All right. She's great. Her name is Hope. I'll put a link to that.
Amazing. Well,
she really has his mannerisms and Anyway,
I will say I never contracted the Bieber fever. Did you? Did you ever contract the Bieber fever?
I had some songs I really liked a few years back, kind of in the maybe middle phase of his career. Not very early on. I was not a big Bieber fan, but there were a few songs I liked. But lately, I just don't know. Like, I think he super talented. I do not have that voice, right? Like,
sure.
Clearly just super talented. And troubled, like so troubled. And I know he's been through a lot. And it's hard for me to watch him like get on the stage. I think it was right at the Grammys in like boxer shorts and nothing else. And again, he has a beautiful voice, but like, I just feel for him, like as a kind of, I don't know him, but I just feel like, can you like go take care of yourself for a while? Like, don't do this performance thing. Do what you need to do to like get into a healthier space. I mean, I don't know. I'm not trying to diagnose him or anything. It doesn't seem normal. And I just wonder if he's really like worked through, and I don't know if you really ever can work through whatever it is that he's experienced. Anyway, what is your recommendation?
Sure. So one, I love a weird science thing. Like I like things that are like, and I like things that are like, a little creepy, maybe just a little bit. So I am going to put a link in the show notes to people who can check out a purple skeleton. And part of and it's naturally occurring. And it's from this Instagram account called It's Mad Science. And it's for people who are interested in like California coastal ecology. The California sea otters eat these purple spined sea anemone, and they turn because they eat so many of them, they actually turn their bones purple, which I had no idea. Like I love otters. I had no idea that it would actually stain their bones.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
It is.
So I'm going to put a link to that because I just think it's like
maybe you should have been a marine biologist
in another life.
Yeah.
And then the other one I'm going to share, that song 99 Luftballons?
Yes.
Lovely song. There is a really
If I knew the words, I would sing it for you. Anyway. All I know is
I actually I know I learned all the words. Like, I think it's in German. I think I learned all the words when I was in high school. I don't remember them all. But I love that song. And there is a really lovely video. I'm part of the Flock Camera Hater Society. Yeah, sure. And there's a wonderful video called 99 Flock Balloons. And it is of some artists with a child. They have all their faces covered, and they take a bunch of red balloons and use it to do all this like filming around these flock cameras. And then they just happen to leave the balloons tied to the post with the camera, and they just happen to cover them. And I just thought it was delightful. And so I would love to share that with all of you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Flock cameras are terrible, but they're just getting replaced, I think, with Axon. Like, I mean,
we need to get rid of all of these companies. They're all terrible.
I agree. So on that note, I think that's it for this week's episode. If you didn't like what you heard, this has been the Triumphant Tradwife podcast. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to The Present Illness, leave us a review, and please tell other folks to check us out.
Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at The Present Illness, and you can stay on top of all of our TPI-related news.
We will be back next week with more headlines, hot takes, and doom scrolling, hopefully wrapped in some laughs.
Until then, agitate, hydrate, take a nap, and we'll see you next time on The Present Illness. Production by Arghavan, Salles, and Alyssa Burgart. Editing by Alyssa Burgart. Social media by Arghavan, Salles. Original music by Joseph Uphoff. Don't take medical advice from random people on a podcast. This show's for informational purposes. It's meant to be fun, and it is certainly not medical advice. Please take your medical questions to a qualified professional. This podcast, our hobby, doesn't represent our employers or anyone else.